we're going to improve. And that's the tiniest little nugget that you could say to somebody.
Yeah.
Is just make good practice swings, and let that feed into your game. But you can't go to the range and hit 50 good ones, 50 bad ones, and expect it to improve. And
All righty, we'll get stuck into it. Colin Swatton, thanks for coming in today.
thank you for having me.
Appreciate you coming down. It's not too far a drive, but it's long enough.
Yep.
We're here to talk about all things golf performance, basically coaching from a holistic point of view, how to bring professional athletes, make them better, how to, aspire developing athletes to, from where they are to getting to a professional level. So my first question is, please introduce yourself to those people who don't know you out there, who you work with, who you've worked with, some of the nice and fun experiences you've had along your journey, and from the big traveling distance of the start of your career to now, maybe some highlights in there as well, and then we'll start from there.
Yeah. Well, thanks first of all for having me on. And so I turned pro. Many moons ago. I was 20 when I turned pro. Went through a traineeship in Australia to become a professional golfer. But it was interesting, and I haven't told too many people this story, but I think there was about 60 of us who were first-year trainees in my year of training in Australia for the Australian PGA. And I knew I was on a different track back then when, the guy at the front of the school that we were attending at that point was like, how many of you want to play on tour? And 59 hands went up.
Yeah.
And then he says, how many of you want to coach on tour? And I was the only guy that put my hand up. And I was like, wow, that's kind of weird. But everyone has their different sort of trajectories. But just the way my brain worked was I was always interested in the why. Why is this happening? Why are you asking me to stand this way? Why are you asking me to grip a certain way in the golf swing? So I went through that. In that journey, I ended up going to Asia. I was in Asia for 5.5 years, a stint in Singapore, and then another stint in Malaysia with a fitting company back then called Henry Griffiths. And that was my first introduction to, oh my goodness, we're trying to fix people's golf swings, but their equipment isn't right. And we saw a little bit of that today. But, understanding how equipment realistically can drive a golf swing or what a player is reacting to. So that I've sort of got a sense of that at a young age. And then when my dad passed away, I came back to Australia to be with him through his process of cancer. And after he passed, I took up a position at Coralbin International School. That's where I met Jason, Steve Bowditch, Adam Scott, Aaron Pike, a whole bunch of guys that were sort of coming through that program, and really then got into not just doing lessons, which I was doing lessons and fittings in Asia. I got more into the process of, okay, well, I have this young kid here who's 12 or 13. He's going to be at this school for the next 4 or 5 or 6 years. How do I transform this person? How do I not just give him golf lessons, but how do I start to develop him? Yeah. And then that's when I sort of started to morph into what I call my total golf improvement system, which is basically, 4 buckets, which is a technical, a physical, a tactical, and a mental bucket. And my job was to try and help those students fill those buckets to a point where they were overflowing. And if they were all overflowing, then obviously they'd be potentially the best player in the world. And I just worked around trying to make sure we were touching on all of those areas, not just focusing on one aspect, be it swing, chipping, pitching, putting, or what have you.
I mean, those buckets are basically what Audens is founded on as well to some degree. And I'm sure that when we look over the developmental years of golf and how we've got, professional, golfers these days, how we look back at that journey of process being like it probably started with just skill set and equipment potentially, and then we started to add the physical and then the mental, and then there's so many other buckets that we can add nowadays, obviously. But let's talk about Coralbin for a little minute. We had some studs come out of that place.
Yeah. That was a really cool place to be at. The kids got let out of school every single day at a certain time because the school owned everything. It had several different what they called excellence programs. Golf was one excellence program. We had athletics, we had soccer, we had aviation, we had tennis, and all these different sports, but they would allow the students to come out, play, and practice, more than what they would be able to do at a normal school. But it was just great. A great environment, all like-minded. Whenever you get like-minded people together that are all driven to be successful, it's almost a melting pot of success in itself. And, we had great success. Obviously, Jason, Adam Scott, Aaron Pike, the list Baudo. There's been a number of very, very good players go through there, both male and female.
So when I got into golf, it was like whispers of this place, because it didn't exist when I got back into it, like 2010. And I don't know why I never ended up getting to the end of that story, but all of these players came from this place, and I was like, oh wow! As far as developmental processes, programs go, that was probably one of the most elite in the country at that point in time, from what I can tell.
Yeah, you had the Australian Institute of Sport and all the state institutes that ran independently to that one governing body, but we had a lot of success, and people started to notice that.
Yeah.
And they'd be like, oh, and there's another kid from Corolban that won, and there's another kid from Corolban that won. And it started to garner a lot of traction. A lot of people started to sort of look at what we were doing and what we were doing differently. And we weren't just standing on the practice tee giving half-hour lessons. We were actually like, hey, short game, chipping, pitching, putting, statistics. We were introducing things like that. Dr. Rob Neal, he was my 3D bio guy back then. So we were capturing bio, we were looking at statistics, we were looking at, shot patterns, we were looking at specific skill sets and developing and things like that. We looked at equipment. So we were doing a lot of stuff that probably a lot of people weren't necessarily doing back at that early stage.
Ticking a lot of boxes.
We were ticking a lot of boxes. We had a great team of people around us. We had 4 coaches that were there. So it was a very, very good environment to be in, but also too, we were kind of pioneers to a certain degree on sort of developing these sort of junior programs, and then sort of formulating that into a sort of a more elite level application, which was great. And it was really good to be a part of.
So when you went from there in that part of your life and moved on to the professional tours, was it with a specific player? Was it with a group of players?
I sort of become a little bit of a father figure and mentor to Jason Day at that point. Jason's dad passed away of stomach cancer the same year that my dad passed away of pancreatic cancer. So we were almost sort of brought together through sadness. His mother, Denning, saw me as someone that was, stable and a good influence on his son, who at the time was, a little bit of a rebel and getting into trouble and things like that. So when he was ready to graduate, his mum was like, well, what happens now? And I said, well, he goes out in the big wide world and
handball away.
I wish him all the success, but I'm here. And she sort of said, well, can you help him out into that sort of transition, getting onto tour, finding agents, all that kind of stuff. So we set about doing that, and I went out and I'd caddied for him at some amateur events, big amateur events in Australia and things like that. So I came out on tour specifically with him for the first 12 months, or what was supposed to be 12 months. And basically that was in 2006, and I finished caddying for him in 2017. So it was a long 1 year. So that's how I got onto tour. And then, I also worked with Cam Percy, did a little bit with Nick Flanagan. Greg Chalmers was another client that I took on, and Jason. But, caddying full time and trying to coach and have the time to be able to put into coaching was difficult. That's why I always kept it at sort of just 1 or 2.
It's such a hard line to skirt with a lot of people. But when you know people really well and you're in there day in, day out with them, it's obviously a big job.
Oh yeah, just caddying alone is a full-time job. You got to get there on Monday, you got to walk the course, you got to prepare things before your player gets there, then you got to go out, you got to execute 9-hole practice round, come back, do what you need to do from a preparedness standpoint. Then they go and do their thing. You might go out and do the back 9, get ready for the next day. So it's hard to do that. And then, being able to sort of also say, hey, Greg, I'm working with you, and then go and,
Yep.
start with him and start down that track. But, Greg was super easy to work with. Cam was the same, super easy, and they were understanding of the time. So it was good. I was able to manage that time and do that well without sort of taking time away from Jace. So it was good. And it's also good too when you work with different players.
Yeah.
Greg's a lefty for a start. Also too, he's got more bones in the body than a normal human being. He's got one leg shorter than the other.
Yeah,
so
he's got some uniqueness.
So because of that uniqueness, you then have to figure things out, and it gets your brain working a little bit more than, okay, I've got this guy that I've known forever and I know what his tendencies are. You're sort of relearning that. And Cam, again, a different guy entirely, great ball striker, but struggled on the greens and things like that. So, it's always constantly keeping you honest as a coach to make sure that you're staying on top of everything for
brain
your
stays
guys.
active. Your exposure to different sort of stimuluses and in situations means that you have to go outside the bubble sometimes that you're comfortable with, which is nice. That exposure alone is worth its weight in gold half the time, because you come up with solutions a lot faster than what you would have normally.
Well, that's the thing is, like, I think it's always good learning, and you can read books and you can go to seminars, you can listen to podcasts, things like that. That's all helpful.
Yeah.
But also too is you've got to almost battle test it.
Yeah.
And what
Stress
better,
test.
what better way to battle test than being on the PGA Tour? But that was part of the thing. Jace was, he was told to go to college.
Yep.
Do your 4 years at college. If you make 3 years and you're good enough, turn pro, whatever. But Jace didn't really like school.
Yeah.
And I said to Jace, I said, you could go out on the Corn Ferry and you could fumble around for 2 or 3 years, but that 2 or 3 years might be worth 5 or 6 years of experience. And you're gonna understand, and you're gonna gain so much from turning pro. You're gonna learn faster. You're gonna be a small fish in a big pond. I said these are all things that are positive. So
figure out what you're worth.
That's the reason we went out early.
You grind hard. I think there's a lot of situations these days where college is like the number one go-to for a lot of athletes. It's like, because it's an education, it's potentially opening up their horizons to jobs after golf if it doesn't necessarily work out, as like a backup plan almost. And then you got guys that never had the college, education, never had the option to go to college, who thrive out on tour in that situation. So it's a bit hard to know what route or journey path is good for that person. I think it's very much up to the individual with the options that they got at the time. But a lot of the times college is great because of the exposure you get to different training, different, situations, education, putting that all together. I think it's great. The collegiate programs nowadays are really good, but there's also guys out there that never had that are doing just fine.
Yeah.
So it's funny to see what kids are sort of made out of.
Yeah, it was interesting. I had a chat with Golf Australia way back when, and their question was, why is the US so successful in bringing these players out onto tour, and what do we need to change in order to do that? And I said, well, hang on, don't kid yourself. We're pretty good.
Yeah.
Like Appleby, Allenby, Ogilvy, all these guys, were big time. So I said, look, don't sell ourselves short. I think we, as a country, deliver a pretty good amount of talent considering our per capita. I said, but yes, college programs, you've got, elite level coaching, great facilities, state-of-the-art equipment.
Yep.
You've got access to all of that. But also, too, is they put their kids in the spotlight. They put them in the cameras.
Yeah.
They're subject to, things that they're going to feel emotionally, mentally in a couple of years. Whereas in Australia, you go and play in the Australian Amateur and there might be 50 people watching you.
Yeah.
Here, you get 150, 200 to like a college, training day versus, what you'd get at, NCAA Division I, like at the end of the year. You're going to get cameras on, your golf channel's going to be there, you're going to be interviewed. It's a different process.
Standards are very
but it
interesting.
prepares them for that little transition on the PGA Tour.
You said it too, like per capita, like Australia has 26.5 million people.
Yeah.
That's less than Texas.
Yeah.
So, the volume of people, trying to be professional athletes in America is obviously a lot higher, let alone, golf specific professionals. And so I'm sure that there's a statistician out there or someone who's crunching the numbers who could actually figure out, you know, how many churn and burn athletes are there from the US that are actually not making it versus the ones that are. But I heard a crazy stat from collegiate programs: only 2% of athletes turn professional or actually make it in professional sport.
Wow.
And that's the NFL programs, the basketball programs, and all the rest of it. So someone will fact check me and cross that somewhere, but that's what I heard. So it'd be interesting to see what it would be for Australian athletes.
Yeah. I think it's got to be up there.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Anyway, moving on. We're looking at the coach-player relationship. You've obviously had a unique experience being caddy coach and father figure, like you've said, for many years. How did you keep the coaching relationship professional?
It was funny. It was a conversation that we had early doors, was to establish what I called hats. I said, when I'm standing in front of you and I've got my caddy hat on, I'm going to be talking to you as a caddy, and I'll be giving all the feedback and everything as a caddy. When I take that hat off and I put my coaching hat on, I'm talking to you as an instructor. And we had to define those roles so that there wasn't sort of a spillover at all. So just simply using that, and sometimes I'd prompt the conversation with, "Hey, I'm talking to you as a coach now."
Yeah.
If we were at dinner and we were, discussing the day's play or decisions or choices that we made on the golf course, and then suddenly we were talking about something personal, I'd be like, "Well, I'm talking to you as a friend here," or
it's almost like a switch on cue.
Yeah, it was just something to sort of allow Jace to be able to say, "Okay, you're talking to me as that person now," which helped define those roles and separate them so that it wasn't muddy. Because we had a lot of people initially that were like, "This will never work. You can't have your coach caddy for you. How's that going to work? You're going to be talking golf swing while you're on the golf course." But because we had that ability to be able to sort of separate it, I think that's what made it successful.
Nice. Yeah, good answer. It's a really it's like I got some really good advice earlier on in my marriage, and it said, "Do you want sympathy or solutions?" It's like if I am talking to you as a friend, I'm probably not going to offer you solutions unless you want it. It's going to be more of the sympathetic tone. Or if I'm there as an educator or a coach, or I'm probably going to be offering more of the solution side of things.
Mm-hmm.
There's obviously different ways you can attack that.
Yep,
that's good.
Definitely.
Developing elite players, we've pretty much already been through that. But is there any key principles that you like that you really sort of, apart from the foundational buckets that you touched on earlier in your career?
It's probably the practice side of it more. I think the practice side of it is underestimated, and even now I've got someone that I'm offering some advice to, and I turn around and I say, "Well, how's this area of your game statistically? How's this area of your game statistically?" And they're like, "I don't know."
Yeah.
And I'm like, "Well, then what do you work on?"
Yeah.
And they go, "Well, I did this last week, and then I go to the range and I try and fix it." And I'm like, "Well, that's not how it works."
Yeah.
The golf score is generated by shots or strokes. Those strokes individually come from short game, approach, driving, and putting. So, if you can define those and know their value of worth to your score, then you can start to place a value or worth on them in practice. And then being able to monitor. You need to know the time that you spend in all of those areas, and you need to know roughly the balls. So that way you can start to formulate your process of what allows you to score the scores that you achieve, and then be able to manage, okay, well, this area of my game isn't improving. I've been given it this amount of time. I've been given it this amount of practice. These are the skills that I've been doing. These are the technical aspects I've been working on. Okay, which one isn't working? And then you can sort of start to fine-tune it. But people don't track their practice. They don't log what they do. And therefore, it's not necessarily drawn back to the statistics. The statistics are there not to say, I'm good at this area or I'm bad at this area. The statistics are there to help drive what you work on in your practice. So that, to me, is a highly underrated and underestimated part of coaching. And that sort of also, too, is the difference between a teacher and a coach.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's in itself is a difference.
I find that's huge because we do a good job of it in here, but there's still a little bit of that special sauce that I think that we're still missing, right? So if someone doesn't have a time management process, or if they aren't monitoring what they're actually doing, they've sort of got an idea, but it's not down on paper and it's not necessarily clarified, to a certain degree. That's the process that we start on as from a high performance coaching standpoint. We say, okay, well, if you're not calculating your sessions, let's just start that process to figure out what you're doing currently. And if we don't have an understanding of that statistical analysis of where you're falling short, what you're doing well, what you're not doing well, then, we've got to try and find that information as well. I think the hardest part for most people that aren't necessarily professional, or maybe even Korn Ferry down as opposed to Korn Ferry up, because, you've got access to statistical information on tour, shot tracker, etc. So you have an understanding about that pretty easily with, the click of a button. But from like a Korn Ferry down that doesn't necessarily have access to good statistical information, we've got programs like Upgame,
Yep.
that you
Clipped,
So for people that don't necessarily have a good understanding of what they can calculate, what do you think is some very easy, let's just say generally speaking, for someone who's just playing a couple times a week, not professionally, something that they can hold on to, just generally speaking, that they can have a look at and monitor?
Yeah, I think for, let's just say, we'll call him a weekend warrior, someone that practices maybe once a week, goes out and plays with his buddies and expects to shoot 85 or less. For those people, it's understanding where the majority of your strokes come from. What makes up that 85? All right. I can guarantee you out of that 85, you're having at least 30 putts or more.
Yeah.
All right. I know that you've chipped twice on a couple of holes.
Yep.
You've had a penalty shot or two.
Yep.
And it's understanding how all of those strokes add up. And if you sit there with a whiteboard and you say, okay, 85, it comes from you've hit your driver, let's just say 14 times. And then you start looking at your iron play, and it's easy for them to suddenly understand that, okay, this is so well over 50% of my strokes come from inside 75 or 100 yards.
Yeah.
It's like, yes,
yeah,
but you're spending 95% of your time hitting the driver because it's fun, and it is fun.
It is fun.
Everybody loves the big dog, and they want to see him eat at the driving range. I get that. But if you're really trying to improve, you need to understand that this is where the majority of your strokes come from, and that if you put time and energy into that particular area of your game to get rid of those three putts, a couple of times where you chipped across the green and you sculled it out of the bunker and you left it in the bunker and all that kind of stuff, they all add up.
Yeah.
And that's where it's easy as a coach to walk up to someone and say, I can save you 5 or 6 shots if you work on this. Everybody wants that.
Yeah.
But it's boring.
No one wants to work on it.
No one wants to work on it. So that's the reason I think still that we're seeing this disparity in the handicapping.
Yeah.
I don't know what the exact one is. I'm not going to go out on a limb and start
let's
quoting numbers because you're going to have somebody that chimes in. But I think when I was looking at it last, the average handicap in a male and female over the last, whatever it was, 25 or 30 years, has only gone down, like I think it was a shot or a shot and a half or something like that. Over that entire time, we've had more technology, better coaching, better equipment,
access to
information, but yet the average handicap's only gone down like a shot or a shot and a half over that length of time. That's mind-blowing. But it's not mind-blowing because we keep working on the same stuff.
Yeah.
The driving range are full of people that are just beating balls. But you look over to the short game area, there's no one. Sure. And it hasn't changed. So that's where, and I tried it. I said, I'm going to advertise a short game school. That's all we're going to do. Chipping, pitching, putting, bunkers, wedge play. How many people signed up? 0.
It's not glamorous.
We don't hit any woods in this thing. No, but I'll guarantee you to knock these strokes off your score. And it's almost asking them for a kidney to have them sign up for a short game school. So I think it's that education process. Is the more things like this, the more people put in front of them, the raw statistics to say this is where the majority of shots are coming from. Just look at your round. Most of these people are 3-putting at least 3 or 4 times in a round. There's 3 shots, 4 shots straight away. 85 becomes 81.
Definitely.
And that's not even to say the couple of times you left in the bunkers. So I think the more that teachers, coaches can educate the general public as to how they're spending their shots and to the importance of knowing where your strokes come from, I think that's when you'll see decline in the handicapping.
And now full throttle into the professional side of things. We're looking at the nitty-gritty, the acute, granular items for a professional. It's potentially on approach, are you inside 10 feet, on a 160, 170 yard shot or something like that. So the statistics get very granular at that stage when you're looking at what you specifically need to work on to better your score, or, so how do you work from that point of view backwards from what you see?
Yeah, I think statistics, as good as they are, they're not necessarily where they need to be just yet. There are a couple of people that are doing really, really good job of that. Little shout out to Tom Boyes. He does an exceptional job of it. And the understanding that the target isn't the target is the best thing that you can learn when you're at an elite level. Yeah. Like I'm talking PGA Tour, DP World Tour level, is that the statistics are measured by shot length from the hole, from the pin. Now, if these pins are cut 3-4 paces off the right edge of the green, obviously we're not necessarily going at the pin, even for these guys. Yeah. Our dispersion is our dispersion. So that's where, guys like Decade and things like that have been making people more aware that our target is actually to be 4 paces left of that pin at a certain club distance. Now, if we're left of that pin and we happen to pull it 2 paces, now we're 6 paces. Yeah. So we're 18 feet from the pin. Yeah. When we look at our statistics, that statistic is slightly skewed because we're saying our proximity to the pin numbers aren't there. So you've got to kind of look at it as, and Tom does a great job of it with his program, to be able to say you get to choose your target, and then you can see where you are in relation to that. But it still is a good gauge. It's ability to be able to say, when I go to the driving range and I hit my shots, and as a kid growing up in Australia, we didn't have a lot of money. We'd hit our own balls on the oval, back on the footy fields, and on the footy field
track.
And you'd have goalposts at the end of the footy field, and your job was to hit all those 7-irons and try and land them between the golf posts or the goalposts. Now, if you could land them between the goalposts, you knew exactly how wide that was, and you'd say,
"You're doing pretty good.
I'm pretty handy." Yeah. So therefore, if you had a pin that was on the left side of the green and you knew what your dispersion was, you knew where to shift your target in order for all those balls to finish on the green. So even though we weren't aware of it, we were kind of ahead of our time doing that. Whereas now we go out and we just hit and try and finish next to the pin, and but we're doing a better job, and we're learning as coaches, we're learning as teachers, and the students are obviously learning and understanding it. But it's just those, like you said, it's those 0.25s, those 1/10 of a shot. All of those things add up to the sum of the big number.
Yeah, I mean, we could dive into that on different levels.
Oh, yeah, you could go way into the weeds on the stats.
I might have to get Tom on here. I've had a little bit of exposure from him, from Lucas Herbert.
Yes.
He's really unique guy. I like him.
Tom's a great guy. I met him years and years and years ago at the Open Championship, and the stuff that he's doing with Upgame and player packets and analyzing statistics, shot patterns, dispersions. Is really, really impressive. But that's not to say that, you can't do something like that on Clipped or,
of course,
or whatever. It just takes more time manually to put it in.
And sometimes it's the manual time, or the manual process is also quite hard.
It's tedious, but also too what it is an opportunity to reflect.
Yeah.
And this is what a lot of, good players, and also too, the viewers and the listeners out there, when you have time to reflect, you're actually anchoring, that round, the good and the bad, but also too, you get the opportunity to take it out and say, oh, that shot I hit out of bounds, I knew I was going to do it.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, well, that's a learning experience to be able to say, okay, next time you have that feeling, or why did you have that feeling? I've been slicing it every time I play that hole, I play terrible. Okay, well, fine. Well, maybe we need to position, your tee on the different side of the tee box. Maybe we did need to take a different club selection.
Yeah.
That's how you learn from it. So the inputting of the stats is tedious,
Yeah.
but it also gives you an opportunity to learn and grow from that experience.
Absolutely.
And become a better player, hopefully.
There's perspective there.
Yeah, there is perspective. Yeah, it's important.
Handling professional pressure and performance. Handling pressure is probably one of my. I think it's something that I sort of just handball to either a sports psychologist a lot of the times, or golf. Everyone has a different sort of relationship with pressure. I think in your experience, because you've caddied under pressure a lot under some very big tournaments, what do you find is the best way to accept pressure, deal with pressure in those high, stress environments?
Familiarity, number one. You've got to be there, and you've got to be in that environment more often.
Yeah.
Sometimes you've got to go to the well and come home empty to understand that you need to keep going back to the well to try and fill the bucket. So it's being in that situation and learning from it. But you've got to keep putting yourself in that situation. That would be the first thing I'd say. The second thing is to be ready for it. Leave no stone unturned. You can't cram for an exam and expect to get 100% on the exam. You've got to be able to say, have I prepared the best I can prepare, and are my expectations in line with what I am doing in order to play that event? So I think those two would be the most important things. I think so many people think they're prepared, and then they get into a situation and it falls apart.
They got no solutions. Yeah.
And they don't, they're in unfamiliar territory and they're underprepared. And then it's like, oh, that's a double whammy. You know where that's going to end up. It falls apart pretty quick. So I think having those two things would probably be, my best advice for pressure.
Yep.
Jace used to say to me all the time, especially in big moments, he'd be like, how come you're not nervous? And I'm like, what have I got to be nervous about?
Yeah.
They're just numbers.
Yeah.
As long as I've added and subtracted, but if you're confident in what you're doing, you can project that confidence. If you're not confident, then that's when it creates, insecurity, uncertainty, and that is a remedy for trouble straight away. So the more prepared you are, it's like even today I was talking to, Carl. I said, when you're in a situation, you're in Jacksonville and it's windy like this, toggle back and forth on TrackMan between normalized and unnormalized and say to yourself, I just hit a pretty good shot there and it curved 30 feet, but then you put it on normalized on TrackMan, it finished 4 feet right of the target. Like, gauge that wind.
Yeah.
Ask yourself, how much is that wind?
Yeah.
Is that 10? Is it 10 miles an hour? Is it going to affect the ball 30 feet? What is it going to do? Because the more that you do that, the more that you're ready in that situation to be able to say, hey, I'm at Sea Island in, a week's time and it's windy and you're playing the 12th hole and you've got a similar wind.
Yeah.
And you've said, I've spent all week calibrating my wind and I know this is going to push this ball 30 feet. You know how to shift your target to be able to do that. But if you don't have that confidence, you can't do it.
No.
So it's that confidence, and knowing that you're ready and I'm ready for this exam. I've been studying it for years or months or weeks.
Yeah.
I'm ready to go.
The armed forces have a saying about, preparation, and I'll quote it another day, but it's a pretty easy one to know that if you prepared the best you can, there's a lot of confidence in that. And if it doesn't pan out, at least you left everything on the table.
Yeah. And you're going to learn from it as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like there is no failures.
Yeah.
There's just opportunities.
For sure.
And golf, unfortunately, is one of those games you're going to lose way more than you win.
Yeah.
Scotty Scheffler's just had a great season.
Yeah.
He had it seems like every week he has every year he has a great season. But to win once on the PGA Tour in a career is great.
Yeah.
To win 3 or 4 times or 5 times in a season, that's unprecedented.
Yeah.
But, by the way, you played 22 events.
Yeah.
So you still lost more than you won.
Yeah.
But it's the ability to be able to say, what did I learn from that experience? Not just, I played crap that week and, I'm just going to work harder. Like, no. What didn't you do well? How do you, work around what you didn't do well? And also to be appreciative of what time you put in to have those particular aspects of your game humming. So, if it took you 40 hours of practice to generate that, if you want to play better, you can't rob Peter to pay Paul. You've just got to have more time. So it's I think so many people, especially at a professional level, don't realize that if they sat down, they looked at what they did, they understood their strengths, their weaknesses that week, and how to then put it and parlay that into practice, that they would see more improvement. There's so much opportunity to learn, but there's always next week. There's always next week.
Yeah, you just another bite at the carrot next week.
Yeah, I got 20 events and I'm going to play 20, and they don't necessarily learn from what happened. We're here in this world because of everything that just happened in centuries of experiences, and people in front of us are going to, do the same thing. So, you've just played 72 holes of experiences that you can, garnish information from if you're prepared to do that.
Learn. Yeah. Learn, continue to develop. I think that the funny thing about being a professional athlete, from what my experience has been, is that, even the good professionals always try to learn something new, or always getting a lesson from someone else. Not that, when I say it's like they're trying to find little tidbits that they haven't heard before, so that it can just bolster up the armor a little bit.
Yeah, and sometimes the same message can be given in a different context.
Yeah.
And have a different outcome.
Said at the right time and the right place.
Right time, right moment. I call it the cool uncle syndrome. Like, you're a parent. You could say to your child, "Hey, you need to tidy the room up. You need to tidy your room up. You need to tidy your room up." Yeah, whatever, Dad. And then suddenly the cool uncle comes around and goes, "Hey, I thought you were supposed to be a professional athlete. That's like, professional athletes don't have a room like that." And suddenly the room's clean, even though you've both said it. Yeah. It was just in a different context that resonated slightly differently, and then suddenly you got the result.
Yeah.
Tidy room.
Yeah, tidy room. Good way to round it out. The future of coaching. So obviously we had a little talk about what tools we have available to us. Obviously we've got, some great technology at our fingertips, and we're sort of emerging on the the AI days of insight. But tell me where you think it's going.
I think here at Audens, I think you're at that level where your understanding of technology is present. Like, this place has transformed since the first time I came here, and even today with the technology that you're putting in, adding another level. Technology is something that in golf has evolved incredibly over the last 15 or 20 years. TrackMan's launch monitors, pressure plates, sims, everything. It's completely changed. But the cool thing about it is it's unpacking some things that maybe we didn't know or we thought we would have known. Now you can measure it.
Yeah.
And the thing with technology is, I think it's great, but it's got to be used in the right context. I see too many people using and becoming reliant on the technology, especially when I look at launch monitors, as opposed to saying, all right, I use a line loft machine to check my lies, period, and my lofts. I use gears to establish where I am at the start of the season, where I set my goals, establish what I want to try and work on with my swing, and periodically throughout the season, I check it and see we're on track because it's measurable. So I think technology has a place. I think it will continue to keep evolving.
Yeah.
AI will continue to keep evolving. There's guys now, and there's apps that you can basically take a video of your swing, you can send it in, and an AI chat will come back and tell you what's going on and what you need to work on. Oh, here's 4 or 5 drills that you can do to improve. So that's definitely going to go that way. The thing that worries me a little bit about the way people are using technology now and the reliance that they're having on it, like, I see kids that are hitting shots on driving ranges here, even at TPC at Sawgrass. The ball's 10 yards off the club and they're already looking at the launch monitor. It's like, watch the ball. Like, the ball only does what it does because of what we did to it. It's face and path. It's look at the trajectory, things like that. So it worries me a little bit that we're becoming too reliant on it, and we're potentially taking away the artistry of the game.
Yep.
Guys like Severiano Ballesteros, he hit it everywhere, but he was the artist. I think right now we're heading in a direction where we're painting by numbers,
Yeah.
not necessarily painting by feel. And I think the blend of two would be the perfect scenario.
Yep.
But it's hard to drag someone away, especially these younger kids that have come up in that era.
Yep.
And with this technology, it's hard to sort of say, just watch the ball.
Yeah.
Did that last one come out a little bit higher? Yeah, it did. Okay, so what affects height? Oh, club face, delivery, angle of attack. Okay, well, look at those things to tell you what you saw, and then maybe look at that for justification in order to see if you're right. But it's hard for them to not want to look at it.
It just something was just popped into my head. It's like maybe we just need to take away the range and put them on the oval and get them to hit the goalposts.
It's funny. It's funny when you talk when you talk to these players and you say, what did you used to do as a kid? And they'd say, oh, I used to, sit at this range and it was an old tree and I had to hit shots around this tree.
Yeah.
And I said, well, how did you do it? And I figured it out. I'd aim, but my club face would be pointing in a slightly different direction to where my feet is, and somehow the ball curved. They didn't understand that there was the face and path relationship and it's curving, but that's how they did it. Or they'd hit underneath the tree, or they'd hit over the tree. So they were working on what you need to work on. They didn't necessarily know what they were doing to achieve it, but they were still doing it.
Yeah.
So it's that artistry. It's like you say, it's like if you literally took them away and put them on the goalpost, they'd know their dispersion pretty quickly.
Very much.
And they're picking up their balls at the end of the night, so they're saying, I better hit these balls close. They weren't just fire, shoot.
Exactly.
Oh, we'll worry about that one that went.
Automated machine comes and puts your ball down.
Yeah, that's what it was like in ages.
Care about it.
So it's like it's the care. It's the care. It's the the process, full pre-shot routine. Every ball has a value.
Yeah.
I always have a saying: if it's garbage going in, it's going to be garbage coming out. You put precision in, you'll get precision out, and it's that every ball counts and it has a purpose. And I treat it with like one.
Exactly. I think driving like neuromuscular pathways, if you hit 10 balls that you didn't care about, what's that telling your system? What's that patterning into your brain? Your brain's like, oh, well, if you don't care about these 10, why am I going to actually give you one that's delivered well?
Yeah.
Or how am I going to know what the delivery is that you want if the information and the input is rubbish?
Yeah, I use exactly the same analogy. I just say, if we went to the range today and we bought a bucket of balls, I don't even know what a bucket of balls costs, $10.
Yeah.
And in that bucket of balls, you got 100 balls.
Yeah.
And you made 50 good swings and 50 bad swings.
Yep.
Let's just say that's a nice normal day for most of us.
Yep.
Have you improved?
Yeah.
No, you've had 50 bad ones and 50 good ones. So even if you said to that person, you still be that guy. You go hit 100 balls, hit 50 good ones, 50 bad ones. Do me a favor. Make 2 practice swings where you just make those practice swings perfect. Now we've made 100 perfect practice swings.
Yeah.
Plus our 50 good ones. We've made 150 versus the 50 bad ones. We're going to improve. And that's the tiniest little nugget that you could say to somebody.
Yeah.
Is just make good practice swings and let that feed into your game. But you can't go to the range and hit 50 good ones, 50 bad ones and expect it to improve. And understanding that, is sort of your start to playing better golf.
But I think what I want to hear from you is your most pivotal point in your career of pure enjoyment. When was your biggest accolade of seeing something come to fruition or realization or a moment in your career where you're like it's that moment where you're like this is a moment that I can't beat.
I'll answer it from 2 perspectives. I'll answer one from a caddy perspective. Having the opportunity to play or to caddy for a player that's playing the current number 1 player in the world at a major championship and winning a PGA championship and that was huge as a caddy. It's a difficult golf course. It's a major championship. It's pressure filled. Oh, and by the way, you're playing the best player in the world. That was in itself probably one of my best caddy moments and caddy, experiences that I could say. Probably, and this is going to sound weird, probably one of the biggest and coolest things as a coach was a text that I got from another coach. And Jason was actually practicing at a golf course out in the desert in the off season. And this coach texted me and said, basically, I've just watched Jason practice for well over an hour on short game. And he said, every ball had an intention. Everything was done with purpose, and everything looked like it would if he was playing, a tournament. And I was like, thank you, and that for me was like, you're doing your job.
Yeah.
You've told someone what they need to be doing in order to be at that level, but also importantly, he had valued the information and was doing it. Nobody was around. Nobody was telling him what to do. Nobody was keeping him accountable except for himself. And that's what separates the goods from the greats, is that ability, that intrinsic motivation, that desire, that belief in what the information they're getting from the people they're getting it from, and being able to say, I'm going to do what's needed to be the best player in the world. And, it was not long after that, I'd say within a year or two, that he did become the best player in the world. But, if you practice with purpose and with that level of commitment, that to me meant a lot as a coach. It was like, yeah, that's pretty cool. When you get, people, your peers saying, this is crazy. Like, I don't see people practice like that. It's like, yeah, I'm doing my job.
It's the belief in what you've taught. Like,
it's
the taking on. It's like,
just his belief, but also too the ability to be able to practice at that level. So that was a really cool, teaching moment for me to sort of say, you are doing the right things. Yeah. And it's hard because, as a coach, especially when, you get in front of these, and even Tim today sort of said, I haven't quite got the confidence. You'll develop that confidence, but also too is sometimes you're in uncharted territory. Like I know when Jace was, becoming better, he was, number 10 in the world, number 8, number 7. I went and I spoke to everyone that I wanted to speak to that had success and coached number 1 players in the world. And I went to them and basically said, like, hey, how do you deal with this? How do you deal with this? I was trying to learn and become better. And it's interesting, you always get different opinions and things like that. But, if you've never done it, you've never done it. But you want to make sure that you're doing everything that you can. But also, too, you've got to trust your instincts and be able to say, like, what do you think? So that was a long-winded, answer to that question. So those 2 different experiences would be standouts for me.
Love it. I could sit here and talk to you for hours, just like a lot of other people. And I think we'll wrap it up there.
Yeah, sure.
Thanks very much for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
If you like what you've heard, subscribe, click on all the links, and we will wrap it up there. Thanks very much again.
Thanks again, mate.
Thanks, mate.